Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, writing in The Independent, suggesting that strikes could go on for another 3 months. Are you of the same opinion?
Well, I certainly hope not, but that's really in the hands of the trade unions. We want to be as reasonable as possible. Steve Barclay and other ministers have been meeting with union representatives to talk to them, to see if there are ways forward, to discuss next year's pay settlement and set out our arguments on affordability there. But I think what you see with inflation today means that if the international factors are beginning tentatively to work in the right direction, the worst thing that we could do domestically would be to significantly increase public sector pay and then entrench inflation in the British economy and get into a kind of wage spiral that will be very detrimental to the economy. So we have to approach this with great caution, because inflation is the big evil. That's the thing that's diminishing people's savings, is increasing interest rates and mortgage rates and making life generally harder for everyone. And so we have to approach these public sector pay discussions with that broader mission in mind, which is to bring down inflation by at least 50% over the course of this year.
And to that end, you know, you can take on the rail unions, you can take on the civil servants unions, but, you know, when it comes to taking on the nurses, you don't have the support of the British people. And I've seen the banners that say a nurses for life, not just for COVID.
Well, we have great respect for nurses, of course we do.
Well, give them more money then.
Well, it's not always as simple as that in
That's
life,
the argument.
Kay, because what we have to judge is not only how can we motivate and respect nurses, and there is a serious challenge with retention and recruitment within the NHS. We have to balance that, however, with general affordability to the taxpayer. What can the NHS, with its record level of investment right now, afford? Secondly, the point about inflation, which is so critical to everybody in this country. And thirdly, how can we manage this in a sensible and appropriate manner? And the way that's done is through independent pay review bodies. And there was an independent pay review last year which concluded that nurses should get the pay rise that they have. We accepted their recommendations.
It isn't independent, is it?
It is independent.
OK. Is it not presided over by the Prime Minister, and lots of government ministers are involved in deciding how much that money is?
Well, government ministers play a role in it, in that we submit recommendations and give a mandate to the independent pay review body, and we're doing that now for next year, the next financial year. But then it's ultimately for that group of experts to look at the evidence, to listen to the perspective of the workforce, of trade unions, of the employers, and come to a balanced judgment.
Isn't it? Don't ministers tell that pay review body how much is in the pot?
Well, we do say what's affordable, as you'd expect, because when any business or organisation considers how much it can afford to pay its staff, it has to work out what is in the pot, if you like. But they also take into account what's happening in the economy, where inflation is and is likely to be over the course of the year, and the particular challenges in that sector to do with recruitment and retention. And at the moment, the independent pay review body is gearing up to work out what it should be a fair settlement for the next financial year. And that's really our focus right now. And they will be taking account of the inflation figures.
Should your focus not be on the 1st of February and the fact that that's a coordinated day of action?
It is, absolutely. And one of my responsibilities as Immigration Minister is to keep our borders secure and allow passengers to flow through our airports as efficiently as possible. And so I'm working very hard to see that if that strike includes Border Force personnel, as it did over Christmas and New Year, that we have the right response. And I hope you and your listeners will agree that the response we put in place over Christmas and New Year was a good one. We used 600 Armed Forces personnel. 50% of Border Force staff came into work despite the strike action. And actually our borders were as secure as usual and flowed, if anything, better than they do on a normal working day. And so that's the kind of detailed work that I'm involved in right now, so that we can try to ensure the country works as well as it can on that day. But the key thing is that the unions don't proceed with those strikes, because all it's going to do...
Well, they're going to.
Well, that's a matter for them.
It is.
We can only prepare. But my message to them would be, think about the impact this is going to have on working people across the country and on the economy. We know that times are difficult right now. What we don't want to see is the economy harmed by, an act of self-harm by further strike action that makes it harder to get to work, to cross the border, and, of course, to get access to crucial public services.
OK, Kemi Badenoch, let me talk about her to you, if I may. She has been writing there's an article, let's say, in the Telegraph today about transgender conversion therapy. She has said she's not actually written to MPs as yet, I believe, Tory MPs, but she wants the ban on trans conversion therapy not to criminalise parents. I'm not quite sure where she's going with that. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do. We all support the abolition of conversion therapies, which are, malicious attempts to convince people to live lives outside of their gender. And so banning people from doing those kind of courses or interventions is absolutely the right thing. But this is a much more complex issue than perhaps it seems at first glance. What we don't want to see happen is parents, loved ones, teachers, people who want to provide support and advice to children put off or criminalised from doing so. If you're a young person who is trans or is thinking through the issues related to trans, it is absolutely right that you should be able to turn to your parents or trusted adults for support and advice at that time. And as a parent, it is absolutely right that I could provide that kind of advice and support to my child without fear of either being criminalised or there being some other sanction as a result of doing so. So the way in which this new law will need to be drafted is one which strikes that balance so that the malicious activities are criminalised and are consigned to history, but that well-meaning loved ones and trusted advisors to children can provide the support and advice that they need to do. And so the way we're going to handle this as a government is to do detailed pre-legislative scrutiny, which those colleagues in Parliament who are rightly concerned about how this will work in practice can contribute to, and then we will craft careful legislation in due course. We're not going to rush into this because I think it's a surprisingly complex issue which we need to treat appropriately. OK, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you about David Carrick, that disgusting, disgraceful police officer who managed to carry out a significant number of rapes while he worked for the Metropolitan Police. My question is twofold. Who is responsible for him being allowed to stay in his post for 18 years? And should he have his pension removed from him? Well, on the second of those 2 points, the forfeiture of the pension is a matter for the Mayor of London, but we support his efforts to remove that pension, if that is indeed what he chooses to do. This is one of the most egregious cases of police misconduct in the history of the Met, perhaps in the history of British policing, and this disgusting individual should not benefit from his years serving in the Metropolitan Police. There now needs to be a very detailed investigation as to exactly what happened and who might have known about this during his years of service. Sir Mark Rowley, who's leading the Metropolitan Police, is focused on that. The Home Secretary has met with him to get explicit assurances that he will be working now intensively to understand the events, how this could possibly have happened for such a prolonged period of time, and what we can do to make sure it never happens again. And then secondly, we've asked Dame Elish Angelini to do a comprehensive review for us about the culture in the police service, about vetting and recruitment procedures, why these cases of misogyny and prejudice seem to happen time and again, and what we can learn from that. And we're asking every police constabulary in the country to improve their vetting and recruitment procedures and giving them the funding to do so. There are other important pieces of work ongoing, like, for example, from Dame Louise Casey, who I've worked very closely with in the past, have the utmost respect for. And so I hope that this body of work that was ongoing even before we learnt about this disgusting case will enable change to happen finally in the Met and other police forces across the country. We must leave it there. Lots for us to unpick throughout the course of the programme. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time. Much appreciated. Thank you.